Dear students, I would like to discuss the overview of your recommendation report and also the organizational pattern that you should follow when you put together all of the documents that will encompass your recommendation report. First, you will write a letter of transmittal, and this is an example. Actually, this entire document is a student's example, and this is a very good example of a recommendation report. And for your letter of transmittal, you are in essence writing a one-page synopsis of the entire report. So I have outlined for you in your assignment packet some areas that you want to make sure that you address in the letter of transmittal. You want to make sure that you do use letter format, and when it comes to choosing the person to direct this entire package to, you can, if it's not a work-related company, you can log on to Hoover's and do some investigating and find out the name of the CEO, so you can use that person as your contact. You can write to that person, in other words. If you are writing a work-related recommendation report, of course you can direct this information to your boss or someone in charge of actually implementing your recommendation if you were to give that person your recommendation report. So make sure that you find the necessary names and addresses for your company. The letter of transmittal, in addition to providing a synopsis of your entire report, the letter of transmittal introduces the report as well. So here you can write something as simple as, here is the report on, and then give the name of your report and its purpose. As you can see, the letter of transmittal is a good page. It's a solid page. It should not go any longer than one page, however, but it should be more than a half a page. So the letter of transmittal is first. Please notice that the letter of transmittal is not numbered, because many times the letter of transmittal will be taken away from the report. So if you think in essence, who is likely to receive a recommendation report, of course that's going to be a manager, a supervisor, or the CEO. And that person will read the letter of transmittal and decide whether the report should be read at that moment, or whether it should be passed on to another employee, or whether it should be filed for another day. So a lot rides on the information in the letter of transmittal. Since it may be taken away from the report itself, numbering the letter of transmittal is unnecessary. After the letter of transmittal, you will design your cover page, and you should have the title of your recommendation report on the cover page. You will have who it's prepared for, who it's prepared by, and the date. And the cover page is not numbered either. Next, you have the table of contents, and of course the table of contents will display your major headings and your subheadings and the corresponding page numbers. This is where numbering begins, and for your table of contents, you are going to use lowercase Roman numerals. After the table of contents, you will begin the body of your recommendation report. You want to make sure that you indeed follow the outline that I have for you, that I have established for you. And that outline, of course, appears in the assignment packet. So we have the introduction And please note that you're not going to use one-word headings. You're going to make sure that you expand those headings. So dealing with a seasonal workflow is the introduction. So here we have the introductory paragraph. After the introductory paragraph, we have the purpose, the scope. So the purpose would be why write a report. The scope is what will the report cover? And by the way, I do not expect you to use these headings that appear in the student example verbatim. This is just an example. It's not for you to take the information and then plug, your text in as needed. This is just an example. If you do anything different than thinking of this and approaching this as an example, and if you plagiarize, of course, that's an F on the paper and an F in the course. We move on to limitations. Another subheading under the introduction, assumptions and methods. And for your methods section in the introduction, this is of course going to be a short section because in the body of the report itself, you have a larger section for your methods. And lastly, the criteria. Note that for each subheading under the introduction, the subheadings are phrased as questions. Remember parallel structure. You do not have to pose or write your headings or subheadings as questions. But remember that whatever method you use, you're going to make sure that you follow that same method, that same grammatical style for all of your major headings and for your subheadings within a major heading. So please be aware of that. Then we move on to the body of the report. So here you can put in information as necessary, whatever you want to focus on. I've given you some information again on your outline to establish what to include in that information, so make sure that you do follow that outline. Note also that there is a quote, and the student has included the in-text parenthetical citation. This is the in-text parenthetical citation. So we have a quote. I will highlight all of this information. And author is the book in which this quote appears. We have the publication date, and we have the page number. Remember that you must have citations, and since you have citations, you must have a documentation page, which will be your reference page or references page. I'll reiterate this point again. I stated this point on the previous podcast regarding your recommendation report. This is a research paper, so you want to make sure that you find reliable sources and that you incorporate paraphrases and quotes as necessary. You are not, however, going to have a paper full of quotes and paraphrases, because that would be plagiarism, because you did not write any of the information. You just compiled the information. So be aware of that as well. I expect you to be the writer, but I expect you to substantiate your recommendations, your thoughts, with reliable sources, outside sources, secondary sources. Throughout your report, you should have visuals, and you can just have one or two. I expect everyone to have at least one, however, and a visual can be a photograph, it can be a table, it can be a pie chart, it can be a bar chart. So for this student, she has substantiated all of her data. Here she explains her primary research, which is an interview, or which was an interview. Notice that the page numbers appear in the header. You can place your page number in the header or the footer. It doesn't make any difference. And she ends the body with her conclusion. And remember that for your conclusion, you're not going to restate new information. You are just going to explain information that you presented, or you're basing the information that you presented on your summary, or you're basing your summary on the information that you presented. And we have the references page. Remember that I'm looking for 3 sources, 3 secondary sources if you don't choose to conduct primary research. If you could choose to conduct primary research, well, then I'm looking for 2 sources. And you want to make sure that you use the proper APA format for your references page, and that information appears in your textbook. I believe it's in Appendix B, but you can definitely look through your textbook to find the information for APA format, for documentation and in-text parenthetical citations. After the references page, you're going to have your appendix information. And think of your appendix as a catch-all. So any information pertaining to your recommendation report, you want to put it in the appendix. If you conduct an interview, you're going to put the entire transcript in the appendix. I do not want you to put the entire transcript in the body of the report. What you're going to do is, in the body, when you discuss your interview, you're just going to pinpoint 3 or 4 questions that you asked of your interviewee and highlight the information in the body of the report. But all questions that you ask, you can place in the appendix. Also in the appendix, for those of you who are conducting surveys or questionnaires, the completed surveys and questionnaires can appear in the appendix. Your articles can appear in the appendix, and that will be actually very valuable to me. So you can put that information in. Any additional visuals that pertain to your report, but that are not vital in your report, so you didn't think that they were necessary to put in the body, you can put those in the appendix. So again, anything that is related to your subject that you want to provide to the reader as supplemental information. After the appendix, that is it. The report is complete. So this is counting from the letter of transmittal to the appendix. This report is 12 pages, so you're looking at probably a report in that range. Remember that from the body to the conclusion, it's around 5 pages, excluding graphics. But when you add the letter of transmittal, the cover page, table of contents, and your references page and the appendix information, you're looking at around 12 pages plus. That is the organization for your recommendation report. Of course, I will post this sample on the bulletin board so you can read through it and take a look at it. Again, this is for your information only. It's not for you to copy or to mimic the style of this particular writer. I want you to develop your own style. That's the only way, of course, that you're going to become an effective writer. Have fun putting together the recommendation report. Probably next week I will post information on your online presentation.